Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Outer Realm, the sister show of our main show, The Outer Realm, which airs on Wednesday and Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. We are broadcasting also on 8 different platforms simultaneously. You'll find us on a couple of the Facebook pages. We're on 3 different YouTube pages. We are on X. We are on Rumble. We are on Roku TV. All platforms essentially have a chat aside from Roku. Of course, Roku TV does not have a chat room. So please bear that in mind. We go to the beat of our guest. So I will periodically put up your comments. I will tag questions, and then we can kind of go with the flow. So today, I've really been excited about this show. We welcome Nicholas Pearson. He's going to be discussing his book, The Witching Stones, The Lore and Craft of the Essential 14 Crystals, Gemstones, Minerals to Empower Your Magic. It really does cover everything. Honestly, guys, if you're really interested in this sort of topic, this is a book you need to get right here. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Nicholas's website right here as well. So highly recommend it. Really, really awesome read. Nicholas has been immersed in all aspects of the mineral kingdom for the nearly 30 years. He's one of the leading voices in crystal healing today. He offers a unique blend of science and spirituality alongside grounded practical approach to working with crystals. He's a regular. I'm really having a tough time today, so I apologize. He's a regular on the metaphysical circuit, frequently teaching and making appearances on podcasts and doing interviews. So we're so fortunate that he's joining us today. And he teaches classes on crystals, Reiki, flower essences, and more online and in person around the world. So he has authored several books, including Crystal Basics. Hopefully we'll be able to convince him to return with some of his other books as well. Fabulous website, so check it out. And he is in Orlando, Florida. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very special guest, Nicholas Pearson. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being here. The book was impressive. It was really a fantastic book. I really immersed myself in it. In fact, like I couldn't get out of it. I think I read straight for about like 3 hours just going into it. And it's so informative. It's so informative. And you have to have, I think, to get into that kind of detail, a real appreciation for the craft, as you say. So where I'd like to start, if it's okay with you, is what got you interested in this sort of thing? Were you the kid on the beach just like looking for crazy things? How do you get inspired for something like this?
Yeah, I was definitely the stereotype. I was the kid who picked up rocks everywhere. It was beaches and gravel parking lots and, magical far off family vacations like the county over. It didn't have to be really exotic, rare, and precious rocks and minerals, but definitely there is something about that piece of the earth that speaks to me and always has. So I didn't grow up in a particularly religious or spiritual household. Other families did church on the weekends. My dad and I did the library instead. And so I'd dive into whatever I could. One week it might be earth science or marine biology. The next week it could be the Egyptian myths or folk tales from all over the world. And pretty early on, I started to notice that whether I was kind of diving into science or diving into religion, myth, spirituality, it kind of boils down to the same thing. And it's us trying to explain the world around us. And whether we're doing that through the things we can measure and observe empirically, or we're doing it through poetry, myth, and metaphor, it still enriches our experience of the world. It deepens our relationship to it. So gratefully, I've never had any problem exploring both and. It's never been either or for me. And it was probably not until I was about a teenager that I found out that like crystal healing wasn't just a historic practice of the curative virtues of gems, but there were real live crystal healers in the world today.
Yes.
And I dove in head first, and I don't think I've ever come up for air. I went to school to study music, but as luck would have it, so the university says at least, I was assigned randomly, according to the paperwork, to work at an earth science museum on campus. I chose the school for its music program and for nothing else.
Yes.
They offered me more money than my first choice school. It was a little bit further away from home, which I also appreciated. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, I end up on the doorstep of the largest rock and mineral collection in the southeastern United States. And more than 20 years later, I don't want to do the math out loud, but we'll say more than 2 decades later, I actually
Yeah.
am curating that collection today. I work in earth science doing that as my day job, and it's been really exciting to kind of have this full circle moment. And
Mm.
yeah, I've been just in love with the earth and with everything that she does since I was young.
Oh, synchronicities. It's amazing how the universe has this way of just lining you up the way you're supposed to be. I'm also, a huge lover of the planet. Mind you, I'm a Taurus, so I am an Earth sign. I do a lot of energy work, and it's all planetary. So it's just, I love when you refer to the planet as her, because that's how I feel. She's Mother Earth, we take care of her, and she just gives back so much. And you see that in some of the beautiful, the stones, the mineral, the crystals. I mean, you go into like a crystal cave, and how can you not be in awe of something like it's just so magnificent? You just look at it, it's like, "My God," like, how does this even exist? So I could see how you would become very enamored with all of it. So this specific project, because you've written other books, and I've perused the website, and it's just, great content. What about this book specifically? That's very detailed. It's a lot of work.
It is, and it went very quickly.
Oh,
To contextualize this project, we kind of have to back up to an earlier project because I kind of inadvertently stumbled upon the topic that seeded this book while I was really far behind writing another book. It
yeah.
always happens, like when you don't have time and energy to stop and do a new thing is when you get the best ideas for all the new stuff. And usually I just kind of jot them down. I have a graveyard of book ideas I've never finished in my Google Drive, and this one wouldn't leave me alone. So
Mm,
I started kind of putting out early feelers, and it had to be, so it was. But essentially, I was really stuck. I've never been so far behind and so hit with writer's block ever, as I was on my ninth book, which came out about a year ago. It's called Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense. I love the book. I'm passionate about the book. It needed more time to gestate, so that's what it got. But the kind of carrot dangling at the end of the stick was the treat of starting something new, and that was the witching stones. So to make a complicated origin story very simple, in 2023, I took this fabulous trip to the UK with my best friend and my partner, and we led a retreat in southwest England, mostly kind of focused in Glastonbury and the kind of mythic landscape of Avalon. But we extended that farther, and a big part of what we did was finding the sacred amidst the ordinary, taking a look at not just rare and precious crystals, which
mm,
are phenomenal, and I love them. And of course, we worked with them on the retreat, but it was really about getting to know the kind of humble bones of Mother Earth,
mhm,
flint and chalk, and some common fossils, and understanding how those have shaped human culture, human religion, spiritual practice, how the energy of the sacred sites we were visiting is at least in part informed by the geology underpinning them.
mhm.
And probably like one of the most initiatory experiences that I had was with flint. Now, I already liked flint. Flint is cool. I enjoy
Mhm.
it. But
Yes.
the kind of work that we did on this retreat basically opened a door that never closed, and I knew that I was going to have to come back to it. And one of the many things I did during the kind of peak pandemic era was write a book about something not related to my normal topics. And I wrote a book on flower essences, and so I was reading a lot of works on ethnobotany and flower essence therapy and the occult history of plants. And I fell in love with a book by Harold Roth called The Witching Herbs.
Mhm.
And I always wanted to give a similar kind of treatment to rocks anyway. And as I continue to deepen this relationship with flint, basically the stone let me know, hey, you know that book you've always wanted to write? It's time, and I'm chapter number 1. So that's how it
Yeah.
happened.
Wow. I think it's wonderful going into the bare basics because people would not look at something like chalk or flint as something spectacular. And of course, the way you lay it all out, and I know we'll talk about them individually, so to speak, but it goes back to literally the beginning of time. Like when you think about the lore, people weren't finding, I mean, maybe in certain parts of the world, crystals and different gemstones, but I mean, these were the basics.
Yeah. The the relationship between human and mineral is as old as hominids, which means it's older than Homo sapiens. It's older than anatomically modern humans. We
Mhm,
have really compelling evidence that that tool making out of flint goes back more than 1 million years.
mhm,
Uh, there is somewhat compelling evidence that there is ritual use of these tools, that there is symbolic thinking about flint that
mhm,
is almost that same length of time old.
mhm,
And, if we think about the attribution of meaning, if we think
mm,
about translating symbols into action, we're talking about ritual, we're talking about magic, we're talking about building a relationship to the spirits of the world around us. And
mhm,
this is foundational to modern day witchcraft. This is foundational to a lot of modern day spiritual praxis,
mhm,
but it's as old as our earliest ancestors. It's
mhm,
older than we can really fathom. And I wanted to ensure that in working through that kind of narrative in the book, I picked some concrete examples of stones that kind of represent some high points along the way. So the way the
mhm,
book is organized, we start with some really humble things:
mhm.
flint and hagstones, which are
Oh, I
naturally
love hagstones.
too.
I do, I love them.
Great minds think
I
alike.
love Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, important fossils like echinoids and ammonites, as well as some minerals that we think of maybe not so much as crystals, definitely not as gemstones, but are really important to everyday life now. And since we've known about them, things
Mhm,
like magnetite or lodestone, salt or halite,
mhm,
lead and its ores, which are all three pivotal for massive advances in human society, human culture, and our
mhm,
ability to navigate the world quite literally in the case of lodestone. And then we start to get into kind of our more semi-precious and ultimately into some precious gems with kind of the latter part of the book. And it's interesting because the journey starts out very humble with something like flint, but ends with something really rare and precious and valuable, which is emerald. And there
mhm,
is a spiritual journey that we go on if we work with the stones in that way. We
mhm.
go through a similar process of refinement inside and out. It's almost like there's this inner alchemy when we engage with the stones that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
So it was so much fun just doing the primary research and putting the data together and then being able to sit with it and internalize it and see what the wisdom of the stones was just incredible.
Do you find, like, I can only imagine, just I learned so much, and I mean, emerald is that's my birthstone, so I have them, and I love them. I just love how they feel. I love how my energy resonates with them. Um, do you find, do you find that some stones, let's say, may be getting a bad rap because of when we say rituals? Life is a ritual. You pray, that it's a sort of ritual. You go to mass, it's a sort of ritual. Ritual seems to just itself has had a bad rap. And when you add stones to them, do you think that people just sort of look at that and go, "Oh, that's just, you know, that's not a good thing." People of faith, I find, might say, "Ooh, I should be leery about this." Whereas it's part of the planet, it's part of the earth, it is part of everyday life.
I mean, for every topic, there are going to be proponents and
Yeah,
opponents. So,
yeah, yeah.
are there folks of a certain ilk who demean and decry the world of gems? Absolutely. But also the holy books that they turn to, that they claim to reference, have
Mhm,
thousands of references to gemstones, to rocks,
mhm,
to materials of mineral origin.
mhm,
So like the fabric of human life is surrounded by the mineral. I mean, if you're like me and there are rocks in your house,
Yes.
imagine they aren't there for a moment and look around. And a really simple exercise to show you just how crucial rocks and minerals and ores are to your everyday life. Look at everything around you and identify the stuff that comes from plants, stuff that you can grow. And if you subtract that, everything else is of mineral origin. So there's a
Wow.
saying, if it ain't grown, it's mined. Um,
Right. Yeah.
like the office that I'm in, I've got these cinder block walls, which are made out of poured concrete. All of the
Yes.
ingredients come out of mineral origin. The devices we're talking to each other on, all of the precious metals, precious
You're
medical
right.
minerals, the silica, just everything about it.
Yeah.
Even plastics are petroproducts. They're derived from petroleum, which
Hmm.
is a mineral resource.
Hmm.
And I mean, it shapes every part of what we do, of what we live and experience. And once we kind of open our eyes to that,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
really easy to understand how it how to re-enchant the world by just spending time intentionally with
Hmm.
crystals, with gems, with rocks, minerals, fossils, you name it. There's a spirit in them, and it's so easy to find wonder if we just allow ourselves to.
I'm glad you said that. In fact, 2 counts. I'm glad you said. I'm glad it's you can't just half like it and half use it because you're right. It is intertwined in pretty much every part of our everyday life. But I'm a rock person. I take them from everywhere I've been in the world. I come back with rocks. It's ridiculous. Even when my hagstones, I get hagstones from different parts of the world. I love it. I love how you also say rock has a memory because how even in science where they have recorded sounds that have come from stones going into like old cathedrals and people have used recorders and picked up resonance from the stone walls. I think there's a place in the US, you may know of it. I think they're called the Singing Stones. And right near the waterfalls. And you can just tap them and they make all these different sounds. I'm thinking, like, that's pretty much. I mean, if you're looking for life's little miracles, I think that's one.
And this is barely scratching the surface of how much mystery and majesty there is in the mineral sphere. I mean, everything that we dig into, no pun intended yet,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, reveals so many mysteries. And it is incredible to me that when we start to explore the science of geology, of mineralogy, of crystallography, when we go through this with an open heart, yes, we're assessing things that can be objectively true, but also we can look
Mhm.
at them as metaphor, as myth, as poetry,
Mhm.
and we start to understand the laws that govern the universe. We start to understand that the state of crystallinity is kind of the default state that matter wants to be in, and then we start to explore how that expresses itself through every other sphere of life, through every other particle that is
Mhm.
out there, and it is incredible.
Mhm. It is. It's a wondrous place. But I like what Wayne has said. I know there's questions, and we will get to the questions. He says we've lost our connection to our own planet, and I think along with that has been an understanding. When you look at something that sustains you and something that gives you everything you need, pretty much to sustain you, for you just to exist, but it does ground you as well. And there's just incredibly, I grew up like, you know, on a lake with mountains, so if I have that instant connection, and it's sad that there's so many people that never actually see that. You grow up in the city, city life, and that's it never goes really beyond that. Um, did you learn? I mean, because you've done so much with all of this. Did you learn anything new in writing this book?
Oh, tons, and not necessarily in the ways that I expected to.
Yeah.
So whenever I start a project, it kind of starts with what is my baseline knowledge? What do I
Yes.
already know? And then where do I need to fill in those lapses in my knowledge? And
Yes.
that's something I really enjoy is making sure that I am learning. I write because I love to teach. I teach because I love to learn. That's
Yes.
as simple as I can boil it down to. But
Yes.
some of the stuff that I came across really did surprise me. For example, if you consult any kind of average witchy book on crystals, you're going to be under the impression that the use of moonstones in magic is millennia old. That
Mhm.
we've got evidence at least from the kind of classical Hellenistic period and earlier. And
Mm.
the truth is that I have yet to find much archaeological evidence from any major
Mm.
institution that suggests that to be true. Now, if we look at textual evidence, there are things whose names we would translate as moonstone today. They are almost certainly not any member of the feldspar family that we know as moonstones.
Mm.
And so it's probably not until late medieval, early Renaissance that we start to see a few objects of art here or there that might be adorned with moonstones. And it's fairly recently in human history that we get our textbook kind of example of what a moonstone is. And we kind of transpose myth and lore from other things onto it as if it's an unbroken tradition. And
Mm.
it is not. And on the other hand, one of the other really fun things that I learned was kind of the opposite. It is very well known, very well attested that emeralds in human history are mostly not the stone we think of today. The word
Mm.
emerald in English traces a long route back through French and Latin and Greek, ultimately even earlier than that. But in Greek, smaragdos just meant any green stone. So you could have a green piece of flint or jasper or agate or chalcedony, or of course beryl, which is
Mhm.
what we think of as emerald, and it would just get that denomination of green stone. You would
Right.
emerald linguistically, socially, and
Mhm.
so a lot of the precious emeralds of the ancient world are anything but. Now there are exceptions here or there. There were some pretty well known emerald mines in northern Africa, in Egypt,
Mm.
but a lot of our so-called classical emeralds are not, and so you don't think of it as a stone that goes back. A precious gem that goes back much earlier than that, but there's actually Neolithic evidence of emerald use in northern Africa, probably obtained from the same emerald mines that
Wow.
thousands of years later the Egyptians would rediscover, now
Mm.
thousands of years ago, and that one of the most magnificent artifacts of them is a headdress or a crown adorned with emeralds and other things. But
Yes.
this kind of follows the prototype of the myth of the crown of the angel, of Lucifer, of the light bearer that falls to earth, and the green stone comes with it. And here we have a Neolithic crown with
Yes.
emeralds, and that was just one of those astonishing little bits that when I came across it, it was not what I was expecting. I was expecting the prototype of this myth to come much later, and it was quite
Mm.
a surprise.
It was a surprise to me as well. I read that and I was like, "Wow, that's something right there." Um, so what makes I mean, I know we're going backwards a little bit, but what makes emeralds so rare?
So let's start with its geology. So emerald is the name that we currently use for
Yeah.
gem quality green beryl. And specifically, depending on where you live in the world, the definition of emerald changes. So some gemological associations only acknowledge a beryl to be emerald when its color comes from chromium. So, like here is an Ethiopian emerald. It
Oh.
gets its color from chromium. In some parts of the world, they will accept vanadium as a coloring agent, but it is a smaller minority. The challenge here is that beryl is a silicate of beryllium,
Mm.
and emerald gets its color from tiny little bits of chromium being added to it. But beryllium and chromium almost never occur in the same geological environment. So to produce an emerald, we have to have pretty cataclysmic events. We have to have
Mm.
neighboring tectonic plates crash into each other with differences in composition, each of which yielding some of the ingredients of emerald, so they come together in the right proportions to end
Mm.
up with it. Because of this, we mostly find emeralds in metamorphic environments, in places where we have um, orogenesis, the making of mountains. They tend to not get very big as a result because they're in parts of the earth that are being broken apart and put back together. We get this superheated hydrothermal fluid that comes in, it's dissolving minerals, it's carrying that essential chromium into that silica rich environment where the beryllium is, and ultimately they come together. Because of that, we don't get very large quantities of good quality emerald in most places on earth. And even the places that are top emerald producers, they don't come anywhere near to the number of materials produced compared to more common things. Think of quartz. Gem quality quartz, optical grade quartz is important to us. We need it. We grow it in a
Mhm.
lab because it's getting harder and harder to find, but we can still access gem quality optical grade quartz in the earth in far more plentitude than we can emeralds. Emeralds, on the other hand, are what we consider to be one of the four precious gems. By
Mhm.
modern designation, it's totally arbitrary. The gemological associations have picked four stones. They are precious. Everything else is semi-precious. And the reason is because they can charge you lots of money for these four, and they're ruby, emerald, sapphire, and diamond.
Mhm.
And of those, only emeralds are acceptable in decent size with large inclusions, because it's almost impossible to find them in any other state. So geologically, they're rare, but also I
Mhm.
think symbolically, there's a lot of work at play in that. They are precious to us because of their history, their lore, our our lust for them, across culture, across time, is
Yes.
is fueled by, I think, a kind of deeper draw, a deeper symbolism they convey, and that's part of what makes them enchanting and valuable.
Mhm. And as far as their metaphysical properties, what would emerald offer? What does that bring to the table?
So, we can start with a kind of surface level interpretation. Emerald
Yeah.
has historically been associated with things like wealth, with success in romance. It is often espoused for its curative virtues. In other words, it's a healing gem. I mean, from a modern crystal healing perspective,
Mhm.
every stone has a healing property. So to call something a healing gem is not very specific. But if we
Mhm.
go a little bit deeper than this, if we start to examine more of what's happening in the lore, we see that emerald is an illuminator. It is associated with myths connected to the morning star in kind of classical astrology. It is a gem that we attribute to the planet Venus, which is,
Mhm.
depending on which part of its cycle it's in, it's either Hesperos, the evening star, or Eosperos, the morning star, Vesperos, the morning star, the dawn bringer.
Mhm.
And so it's this theme of bringing light, shining light upon things. If we look at some of the earliest cognates, in the ancient world, that give rise to the word smaragdos, where we can look at, Egyptian, Assyrian, Hebrew. These are words that often have words that look very, very similar to the
Mhm.
Greek smaragdos, but they also, in addition to meaning a green stone, might mean shining. They might mean lightning. They might mean spark or flame. And so it does have this quality of lighting something within us. And what I think Emerald is here to do is to essentially remind us that we, as inspirited beings, we inhabit matter. We live in material bodies in the material universe. We are there is an animating force, an illuminating force within us. And when we tap into that, there is a magic that we have available to us. There is a power that comes with that, a responsibility to be agents of change, of illumination on behalf of others as well. And so Emerald becomes this kind of talisman of reclaiming your sovereignty, of
Mhm.
stepping into the world from a really conscientious place, a really compassionate place. We still want to think about that archetype of Venus and love, and it's not just romance. Love is
Mhm.
the force that holds the universe together, that keeps all bodies in motion, that drives us towards change, evolution, towards union with the divine. And so one of the effects of working with emerald, particularly long term, is that it wakes us up to the memory that we are love embodied. Full
Mhm.
stop. It's not you deserve love if, when, or sometimes. You
Mhm.
deserve love because you exist. Maybe said a
Mhm.
different way. You matter because you are matter. You
Mhm.
don't do anything to earn it.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, look at the world around us. We are bombarded by messages that tell us, oh, you need to be more successful. You need to be taller. You need to be thinner. You need to be wealthier. You need to have a different color hair or different clothes or a different car or live in this zip code. And you're always doing something to feel like you are worthy. But
Mhm.
it says, actually, none of that matters. You are worthy now. And when we remember that, it is so much easier to get up and do the deep work. It is so much easier to live from a place that is embodied, that is meaningful, that is empowered, that is magical. And if you live that way, other people want to live that way too. When you hold that torch aloft, other people can light their own torches from it without you having to give anything away. When we put that light, when we put that essence out into the world, other people naturally wake up to their own.
Yeah, I agree with you on all counts. It's the resonance. You get the old saying, what you put out there comes back to you. We are all energy, and I think people forget that. I mean, we ourselves could be looked at as a miracle of sorts. I mean, we're technological, biological beings. Like we are, we can heal ourselves. There's a reason I think that some people work so well with certain stones and minerals and crystals. Like I'll go to quartz for a moment. Like example, you have the original crystal skulls, which is very, very interesting considering, people are kind of like who made them, getting into the precision of all of these things. And then, there's new crystal skulls. And somehow we tend to lean towards those. Those of us who are pretty in tune with them can lean towards them. You can look at one, you can pick it up, you can hold it and say, this is my guy right here. This is how I feel. Like I chose this one because he's very peculiar looking, in the nose. He's got this really kind of crazy nose and he's more old fashioned. And I wanted one because I have lineage that comes back to Peru. And I said, it has to come from this area because I know they also have beautiful quartz mines and stuff there. This is a smoky quartz. Like they call it like the black quartz, but it's a smoky quartz. So what is it about it? I mean, we are these people that can just pick something up and go, this works for me. This is mine. I feel this. And
You know, sorry. I think there's a lot of layers to that kind of question. There's no one size fits all answer.
yeah,
Sometimes we're drawn to something because it feels familiar. It embodies a principle, a lesson, an energy that we've already integrated. And so we're attracted to that because it feels like home.
yeah.
Sometimes we're drawn to a crystal that represents healing work that we are called to do. It is something that we are in the process of becoming. It's something that we're really conscious of. And it also tends to feel very comfortable because we're familiar with that. But
Mm,
I'd also recommend that we pay attention to the crystals that make us feel the most uncomfortable
mm,
because they tend to embody energies, frequencies, lessons, symbols, whatever you want to call it, so far outside of our home base that we haven't begun to integrate that wisdom.
mm,
So there's a lot going on there. We can be attracted to something one day because of our mood, because of our mental affect in this moment, and then the next day have moved on from it completely. I mean, more than once in my life, I've gone, "Oh, I love this crystal," and then it comes home and it goes on a shelf, and eventually we take a picture of it and slap it in a book. And so I'm glad I had it. Um, and then other times I go, I don't really know why this rock keeps calling to me. And it goes on that shelf. And then a year, 2 years, 5 years later, it is exactly the tool I need at that time. But I wasn't attracted to it in the moment other than this is curious. I don't have this in my collection yet. So I think we need to be open to a lot of different ways we can build relationship.
mm,
And I think it's far more important that we start that relationship from a place of self-reflection rather than trying to get prescriptive about
mm,
what we ought to be working with. I can read the crystal properties in a book and say, "Oh, well, I'm working on expression, so I'm going to pick a blue stone for my throat chakra." But really, what is your personal obstacle to expression? And then we unpack that, and then we find the crystal that most closely matches our circumstance. I
mm,
think I think that is a better way to go about it than just, oh, I want to throw a chakra crystal because I want to talk better. We got to know like what's really going on in our lives. What is holding us back from achieving that outcome that we desire?
mhm,
Oftentimes, doing that level of self-reflection is therapeutic. Um,
mhm.
but if we have the crystal to catalyze it, it can take us so much farther.
Yeah, you know what? I've experienced what you're talking about. You find something, you love it, and I'm just wondering if it's because our energy changes, our evolution changes. Like we evolve. So is it possible that we're just outgrowing that specific piece?
I think that's one of many options. Definitely,
Right.
we can be outgrowing it. We can
Yeah.
also just get to a point where it feels so comfortable that we don't necessarily have to have it on our person at all times. I think
Yeah.
one of the mechanisms by which we can explain crystal energy having an influence on us, is
Yeah.
that they essentially entrain us on an energetic level. Think of it as like a tuning fork. And if you've got an instrument that is out of pitch, you strike the tuning fork and it demonstrates the pitch you're aiming for. It doesn't change the intonation of your instrument. You got to
Mhm.
sit there and adjust slack or tightness on the string or pull out a tuning slide or whatever it might be, depending on the instrument you play. You need to hear the correct pitch. Well, eventually, if you develop your sense of pitch really well, you can just go, oh, I'm going to hum A440, and I'm probably in the ballpark without needing that tuning fork, and I can just find the pitch. Or I can sit in an ensemble of musicians and tune by consensus, and I don't need someone holding my hand anymore. So I think that's
Mhm.
part of the reason we sometimes feel like we move on from crystals.
Mhm.
On the other hand, there are some lessons we never really fully learn, right? We are
Yes.
human beings after all. um,
Yes.
I have crystal allies in my life that are going to be active partners in my healing process until I leave this body, and that's just fine. I've made my peace with there are some lessons that maybe I'll never get perfect, but I'll
Mhm.
keep trying, and they're still there to support me.
Mhm. I love that. And with quartz, it's interesting because it's one of those things that you've listed so many things as far as grounding, healing, um, protection stone, and different colors do different things. You have the rose quartz, the love stone, like all of this really positive stuff associated with it. And you go through the list. But what do you do, like, for example, in the field of the paranormal, for example, they'll say, oh, I got my quartz with me and it's my protection stone. But yet, quartz also magnifies energy. So energy can attach to it and magnify, in a sense. It's like a double-edged sword.
So the solution to situations like this starts on the inside. What is our goal? What are the parameters for the
Mhm,
relationship we're building? And then how do we build that relationship?
mhm.
If we treat crystals as inert objects, as a means to an ends,
Yes.
then we're not taking into account the relational side of things. So if I've got a piece of quartz, like here I've got this little kind of wand-shaped frosted crystal from Inner Mongolia.
Yep.
Maybe I want this as a protection stone. Maybe I
Yes.
want this for something else. Um, if I never let the crystal know what we're working on together,
Mhm,
it's going to kind of stay in its base resonant frequency, which is multitasking.
mhm.
Um, but the
Yes.
moment we start to initiate conscious relationship, then we get more out of it. So a lot of us might consider this to be programming our crystals or charging
Mhm,
crystals, um,
mhm,
or inspiring them to help us in a given task.
mm,
And this is really important. It's one of many steps that should be regular parts of the process. We should be regularly cleansing our crystals as well. We should
mhm,
be regularly charging or programming them for a specific intention. We should also be giving them breaks. Just like you can't be on all the time, we shouldn't expect the spirit of the crystal to always be doing something for us. It's
mhm,
got a reciprocal relationship. So if you
mhm,
want a crystal to protect you, you got to program it for that. You've got to build a relationship, set the expectation. It's like making the request to say, hey, you're good at so many things, but there's one specific thing I need your help with.
mhm,
And then we do that. And then we engage in practice. Maybe that is a meditation. Maybe that is building a grid or a layout. Maybe it is a simple prayer or invocation before we
mhm,
keep the crystal with us out into the field. But if we're not doing those things in a relational sense, if we're not working together, the crystal's just doing its own thing. It's doing its own thing and probably helping us on one level or another,
mhm,
but it's our commitment and our follow through even more than our intention that matters, because I
mhm,
can intend for the crystal to help me, but if I leave it at home on my desk when I am going out into the kind of paranormal field at night, what
mhm,
good is it doing for me at home on my desk? So we've got to have
mhm,
all those parts working together.
mhm. It's just because you look at places that are built on quartz, levels of quartz. The energy is just, like, through the roof in this place. You go in there and people say, "Oh, my place is haunted." Then when you start looking at the geology of everything, you're kinda like, "Yeah, it is." Like, it's just loaded under there. So it's like, again, it comes I get from what you're saying, it comes down to intention. Right. The intention of,
Intention, I'll say, is a piece of it.
yes,
We've got to have intention. That is
yes,
like our steering wheel. We've got
yes,
to have the tool and the practice that goes with it. That's the vehicle.
yes.
But we have to show up with our internal and external commitment,
Mhm,
our energy, put our follow through into it, and that's the fuel for it. If all you
mhm.
have is intentional, it's like handing someone a steering wheel and say, okay, go ahead and drive to Oklahoma. But you
I
forgot
like the analogy.
the gas
Yes.
in the car. So
Yeah.
intention alone is not going to get you anywhere. It is a
Right.
crucial piece of the puzzle, but it is not the whole thing.
Yes.
You need it. But if I, again, if I intend for this piece of quartz to protect me, and I don't use the vehicle, all I've got
Right.
is a steering wheel. If I don't
Right.
put the energy into it above and beyond my intention, then there's no gas in the tank either. So we got to have all three.
Okay, perfect. Oh, that's perfect. Because this seems to be, people will get these little, sometimes just little guys, whether they're stones, whether they're, again, and I often hear that they develop this sort of personality and they start communicating with this external being that is indeed, the skull, for example. Could be anything, could be a bird, could be, whatever the case may be. So are we the ones calling something in for something like this, or does the quartz actually have its own personality, its own spirit? We know it has energy, so
I often self-identify as a kind of feral artist. I
yes,
believe in an inspirited world, and I also
yes,
don't believe there necessarily have to be a lot of rules to it.
right.
There are if-then statements that occur that I can observe, but it's maybe a little bit different from situation to situation. So the answer to this question has a lot of layers.
Okay.
We have to maybe take a step back and explore this through two lenses simultaneously. One of them is that kind of animistic lens where everything has a spirit, everything has consciousness. If there is something with form, seen or unseen, there are also forms beyond the material, then there is a kind of steward or energetic container for that, something that holds the Platonic ideal, the archetype of it, the blueprint of it. And so there is a spirit on that level, one way or another. Spirits, kind of like the cells in our body, are also many-fold and have many layers of organization. So we're going to have almost like a nesting doll of smaller spirits that make up larger ones, like cells make up organs, make up systems, make up our whole organism. So there's layers to that. The other piece of the puzzle here is we have to really evaluate. Let's use quartz as our kind of exemplar of this, of how crystals work on kind of the most universal level. Crystals cohere energy. They make it more organized because they are themselves organized. A side effect, but not the purpose of that, is they increase the amplitude. In other words, they make the signal louder. We might say that amplifies or magnifies energy, but it's just that when it's more coherent, it carries farther. They're natural receivers and transmitters. They're like antennas. So they're going to transmit the signals that we would like to broadcast. They're also going to receive signals being broadcast. They are very essentially here reflectors and
Mm,
refractors. They reflect things back to us and also kind of break things down or redirect things into their component views. They're also able to store, so they're recorders. There's that kind of stone has memory concept coming back again. And they're translators. They transduce energy from one state to another.
mhm.
So what I want to come back to is this idea that crystals reflect.
Okay.
There are a lot of very well-intentioned folks who have conversations with a being they believe to be their crystal when it is in fact themselves they're talking to, because crystals are reflecting the kind of hidden parts of our psyche back to us.
Yes.
And this is where in any kind of psychic, intuitive, mediumistic kind of field, it is essential we cultivate non-attachment and discernment. The more attached I am to the outcome, the less likely I am to get an honest answer. Also, if I am not discerning, then I cannot tell the difference between perception, that is from the outside in, or projection from the inside out. And you can get very good information from yourself. There
Mm,
are a lot of people who probably never channel anything other than themselves and get great advice because we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. But at the same time, we shouldn't assume that every disembodied something we think we encounter really is a disembodied something. So
Mm-hmm.
when connecting to the consciousness in a crystal skull, for example, is it the consciousness of that raw quartz that was used to create it? Is it some trace of the consciousness of the person who carved it because they spent so much time working on it?
Yes.
Is it the consciousness of the archetype of the skull, which includes our own skulls and that own kind of consciousness? Is it something more in the Davic sphere? Is it an external entity coming through?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and probably all and neither. And any number of those things can be true simultaneously. So this is where the discernment part comes in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for clarifying that, because I've often felt the same way with respects to perception and who are you really communicating with. If you're projecting out energy yourself, and this does reflect, as you say, then a lot of it makes sense as well. So thank you. I don't play with my crystals too much. But even then, I just find myself, I'll just be sitting here working and I'm just like, you know, where I do get the most energy from, I won't lie, are things like hagstones, if we can talk about that, and just everyday stones. These came back from the south of France because it's one of my favorite places. Power spots, having power spots. I enjoy wearing things, for example, power spots, the Preseli bluestone, the stone, as they call it, the Stonehenge stone. Ah, there we go.
Yeah, it's one
You
of my
get it?
all-time favorite rocks. I almost never leave the house without a piece. Uh,
Ah, okay.
I love it.
What is it about this stone, do you think? Because I don't know what it is about it. I just know that I wear it and I feel great wearing it. I love the connection I have to it.
So, here's the question: how much time do we have? Because I could spend 2 hours just on Preseli bluestone. This is a
It's
rock
your show.
I really love. So most of what we encounter as Preseli bluestone in the marketplace is um, in igneous rock, and it is intrusive in nature and lightly metamorphosed. So what that's going to tell us is it starts by the cooling of molten rock. Now, the bluestones from Meneth Preseli that are in Stonehenge are rhyolitic in composition. They they are made under slightly different circumstances, but from the same event. So they're not identical. The stuff that is mined comes from a site of special scientific interest. SSSI is a designation in the UK. It's taken from private land with permission. And there's like only a certain amount that can come out of the earth every day, but it's not the
Wow.
exact same hole in the ground that the ancients would have taken the bluestones from. Same zip code. It's
Yeah.
close enough.
Yeah.
And what we see with those little spots, so these are concentrations of lighter minerals like quartz and feldspar. We call these oikocrysts. So this happens when we take that original igneous rock called diabase or dolerite, depending on your specialization in geology. They mean the same thing. And if we apply just the right amount of heat and or pressure and or hydrothermal solution, we start to move some of the ingredients to form these little patches. And those little patches almost resemble stars against the night sky. Now, when the
Mm.
stone is a weathered face, it's kind of a dull gray, but when freshly broken, particularly if it's wet, or when polished, we do get that kind of blue-green background color, and then those bright white oikocrysts in the ophitic varieties. There's some that have none.
Mhm.
And we see this union of lightweight, brilliant, luminous elements inside the oikocrysts, inside those little patches, and then the really anchoring stuff in, we'll say, the background of it. It's really complicated composition. I'm not going to list everything in it because it's more than
Yes.
2 dozen different minerals
Mhm.
that make up any small sample, more in
Mhm.
large samples as well.
Mhm.
But it's a stone that is deeply activating because it is both grounding and expansive. We could say that it's an upper and a downer at the same time.
Yes.
It takes us up
Yeah.
and down without losing touch with what is happening here. It is also really deeply embedded in the cultural and mythic landscape of southwestern Britain, from Wales and Moneth Preseli, where it comes from, into Wiltshire, into the Salisbury Plain, where we find it in Stonehenge. There are many other
Mhm.
megalithic sites that actually use one variety of uh, Preseli bluestone, of either the dolerite or the rhyolite as well. And when we kind of take a sampling of a broader perspective of how it interacts with the landscape. It is a transformer and a maintainer of energies.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of only many materials used in making Stonehenge. Sarsen is another stone. It's a type of silkrete, 97% quartz kind of sandstone that is really strongly lithified together. And one of the more curious things about Stonehenge, not widely publicized, the really big stones are this quartz-rich stone rather than the complex geology of a blue stone. But the infill beneath the bases of those giant sarsen stones, they're called, includes chips, flakes from the Preseli that were put there centuries earlier.
Wow.
So we
Yes.
get kind of relational field. They're embedded in this chalk-rich and flint-rich environment as well, and the kind of karst topography, the water moving through that kind of limey chalk strata with those concentrations, little pockets of flint, which is relatively pure silica.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get these giant sentinels, these monoliths, these stone circles. The combination of these elements creates a really dramatic shift in energy. And when we work with this stone, it sensitizes us to shifts in energy without allowing it to fry our circuits. So if we want to be sensitive to earth energies, the blue stone is going to enable us to be in conversation with them. It's going to let us like plug into something without getting burnt out from plugging into something that's much higher amplitude than us. That's, again, just scratching the surface. There's so much more we could say, but if you love bluestone, there's a brilliant book by Sue and Simon Lilly called Preseli Bluestone. I think the subtitle might be Healing Stone of the Ancients or Healing Stone of the Ancestors, but Preseli Bluestone by Sue and Simon Lilly. They're brilliant. They're wonderful folks in the field. They're kind of like trailblazers for a lot of the rest of us today.
Oh, thank you for that information. I love it. I got turned on to it because I thought, oh, it's like the dreaming stone. And I love that. Of course, you tag Stonehenge to it. I love power spots. But I agree with you. Sometimes knowing now, because I read your book with the minerals, the chalk and the flint, a combination of everything that sits underneath it, the flowing water, the energy, does this, because, I'll back up, the ancients always built near or over power spots, of course, right? Because if you're going to erect something of this magnitude, you're going to want to feel it. And stone resonates, it does incredible things. But what makes it the power spot? It's like, what came first? The chicken or the egg? Is it everything that's combined that turns it into the power spot, as you mentioned, this crazy fabrication of energy? Or is it near a power spot, on a power spot, that makes everything go even bigger?
I think there are a few good philosophical questions wrapped up in this that do not have black and white answers.
Yes.
So let's by analogy.
Yes.
What is the most powerful point on the human body?
Yes.
Which part of the human body is sacred?
Okay.
So which part of the body of the earth is sacred? All of it. Every part of planet Earth is a power spot because the life force of the planet courses through all of it.
Yes.
So there are modern systems that attempt to justify and reconcile and map out, and sometimes they get it right, and sometimes they get it really, really wrong when we look at the underlying science of geology and geography and do all that. And honestly, if you find value in the system that you're using, continue to use it. But part of, I think, what makes these power spots is based on relationship. The land is sacred because it is the land. That's a complete sentence. There's no if or when or sometimes. It's just the land is sacred because it's the land. But we derive meaning when we build relationship with the land. And when we come across a place like Stonehenge, like Avery, like Uluru in Australia, like the Grand Canyon, I mean, they can be natural features as much as anything else.
Sedona.
Part of what we feel is the echo of the collective wonder of every being who's been there and oohed and awed over it. We're feeling the echo, the imprint of every prayer, every ritual, every emotion felt at those spaces. And of course, when we build something that is larger than life, when we construct something that is magnificent, when we build something intentionally and with symbolism, we are harnessing that symbolic language, that
Mhm.
relational language, and it encodes that in the space. So yes, there are power spots, but one of the deeper lessons that I have learned from working with emerald in particular, to kind of bring it back to a stone that was really pivotal in this retreat, where I went on kind of tour through a lot of these sacred sites, including private access to Stonehenge. We were there in the stones, and it was
Mhm.
amazing. Um,
Yes.
is that like, the story of emerald is kind of linked to the story of the crown of Lucifer and the Holy Grail and the Emerald
Mhm.
Tablet. And the
Yes.
real lesson there is not that there was one stone that fell to earth, but that the earth itself is that stone. The hidden stone
Wow.
you seek is right where you are. It's
Beautiful.
to use pop culture.
Yes.
It's Dorothy was wearing the ruby slippers all along.
Right.
She didn't appreciate it though until she
Yes.
traveled so far. And so I
Yes.
think part of the reason we engage with pilgrimage, part of the reason we go to power spots that are outside of the ordinary, because
Mhm.
it breaks us open through that sense of wonder. And then
Mhm.
when we go back, our job is to find the same sense of wonder, the same relationship to the land, the same magic
Mhm.
everywhere you step
Mhm.
foot.
Mhm.
Right where you are is a sacred place, but you have to remember it and you have to wake up to it.
See, that's beautiful. I also share that resonance with like with space. I wear a lot of moldavite. I wear meteorite. Like I wear all the time. So I just to me it's just like this the whole it's a universal thing. Being again Taurus, I'm always very grounded to the planet, but my head likes to just go. My head just likes to go places. My consciousness. Um, can we talk about hagstones?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love hagstones. I've got different ones from different parts of the world. They all feel different, but they're all incredible.
Hagstones are really marvelous. I've got one here from very close to where I grew up in South Florida.
Very nice. That's a beauty.
Yeah, they're weird and wonderful. Hagstones are one of those objects of wonder. I mean, go to a beach, riverbank, whatever it is, where you're going to find pebbles, and if you spend enough time, you will probably eventually get lucky and find a hagstone. If you live in
Mhm.
certain parts of the world, you're more likely to get lucky than others. I mean, go to South
Yes.
Florida and just
Yes.
walk up and down the beaches after a hurricane, you're probably going to find tons.
Wow.
Um, so, um, the idea of a stone that is defined not by its makeup, but
Mhm.
by a process applied to it tells
Yeah.
us a lot about the cultural designation of hagstones. If we
Yeah.
look at their folk names, we also get clues about the kind of meaning of them. They're named hagstones and witchstones and hexstones and pledge stones
Mhm.
and chicken gods. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. They've got so many different kind of folkloric names that give us insight into their value.
Mhm.
But hagstones, because of their otherness, their strangeness. We think of rock as eternal, as
Mhm.
lasting, as something that is durable, and yet something's been eroded through it, whether
Yeah.
that's by movement of
Yeah.
sand and sediment and water and wind and rain, or by organisms like little mollusks called the piddick, which bore holes in clams in some regions, not so much here in Florida, but other places where you find hagstones, you might find those. And so it is very much this process of erosion, of breaking down, of opening up. And they are kind of a stone of breakthrough. They can represent letting ourselves become more open. So folklorically, we see them connected to kind of the other world because they represent the opening between here and not here, here and beyond, sometimes
Mhm.
called eye stones and Odin stones, a reference to his one eye, of course. And they allow us to see between time and space. They let us connect with more than just what our material eyes are willing to focus on. But
Mhm.
even this idea of crossing a border or seeing beyond is related to the word hagstone. Uh,
Mhm.
I fancy myself a language nerd. Once upon a time, when I was trying to make up
Mhm.
what to do with my life, I thought I would go into the field of linguistics, if not science or music. And so I like language. I just never made a formal study of it. But the word hag is related to the word hex, as in magic, and
Mhm.
also hedge. And the root of it more or less means a kind of enclosure. And if we go to early Europe, Western Europe in particular, we see that villages have a boundary around them. And we have the civilized world enclosed by a hedge, a living border, and then outside of that is wild, is dangerous. There could be brigands and thieves, there could be vicious creatures, there could be any number of things. And so the prototype of the witch as hedge rider is someone who crosses the threshold between the ordinary and into the non-ordinary. She goes out there to forage for herbs, to find the roots, the barks, the flowers. She goes beyond to make compacts with spirits beyond the civilized world. She's fearless because she crosses over. And so the hagstone doesn't get its name from anything related to a wizened old crone, but
Mm.
from the idea of the hag is the hedge rider, the one who crosses beyond. And so it's a stone of magic, literally
Mhm.
magic embodied. It is this otherworldly process that has broken through stone. And if we
Mhm.
surrender to maybe not the supernatural, but the preternatural forces all around us, then we
Mhm.
broken open and be vessels like the hollow bone, the hollow reed, the hollow stone. We can allow that magic to flow through us.
Mhm.
Just so darn cool. There's so much folklore. I don't think we could pack it into the time we've got it available to us.
Mhm. Yes, I know it. There's so much to it all. I'm in wonder, in awe, I guess, when I look at the creation of some of these things. Nature is just so powerful. I've got what looks like glass that's just formed by the sea, by the ocean. It's just big, crazy, sharp edges. It looks like somebody just took a huge hunk of glass out of something. And I look at it and I just examine it. And I'm just like, God, you're just amazing, and never even thought it was a thing until I started researching it. And it's like, God, it's just amazing what nature does. Which brings me to, I'm bopping about a little bit, but I'm just kind of going with the flow of the conversation. Amber and jet. You combine these two, and it's almost like, to me, I took it as balance of some sort, just balance.
Yes, and also historically, people didn't think they were that different. So, amber is the fossilized resin of some very ancient trees, and
Yes.
jet is the fossilized wood of some ancient trees. Neither of these are permineralized. So, oftentimes, if we think like petrified wood by comparison, that is organic wood that is replaced by, through the process of permineralization, it is
Mhm,
replaced by an actual mineral, a crystal. And
mhm,
so it retains the shape. You can take thin sections, look at it under a microscope. You can see the shapes of cells. They're going to be a little deformed, but
mhm,
there's no organic matter left. It's all mineral.
mhm,
On the other hand, these have not undergone that permineralization process, so they're still made out of organic stuff. Now they've been compressed and changed and shaped and reworked a little bit, but they're still made of organic
yeah,
material.
yes,
Both lightweight, they are historically some of the important places for finding them are along seashores. They float in salt water. They are flammable. They take a similar kind of polish. They have similar hardnesses. So people genuinely thought they were just two different colors of the same substance.
hmm.
In fact, we find some references to a lot of references to jet as black amber, midnight amber, witch's amber.
So
They
it's very lightweight,
very
like
lightweight.
amber would be. Okay, yeah,
Exactly. So that is part of the impetus of bringing them together, because if ancient peoples believed they were the same or similar substance, that meant they were also meant to have very similar kinds of functions, and the end results of these stones is very similar. They're both very protective.
mhm,
They they're both used in rituals that might involve protection against spirits or driving away spirits. They're used in curative magic. They are used in communing with the gods or the ancestors or whoever it is that a given group of peoples might have cared about. We see them in funerary practices as grave goods, as offerings, as jewelry worn by the deceased. And they don't typically occur in the same place. And so through trade, they travel far and wide. For
mm,
example, the most historically significant places for collecting jet is in Yorkshire, in the coast of the
Mm.
Whitby, in England. And by the time of the Roman occupation of Great Britain, they traded British jet to the far reaches of the Roman Empire. So you find, before modern trade routes, you find jet in Austria, you find it in Germany, you find it in France, you find it in Italy, you find it elsewhere, and it all comes from one beach. So, similar to like our Baltic amber, which does occasionally wash up on the opposite coast of the UK, but we're going to find that in other parts of the world, and it just got traded back and forth. This is amber in particular probably represents the earliest known gemstone trade route at tens of thousands of years old.
Wow.
And so the magic of these stones is really phenomenal to me because it blurs the line of what we think of as mineral. They're organic substances, but they're part of the fossil record, but they aren't themselves actually minerals. They have some unusual uses. It was common to burn them. You can do this. It will smell unpleasant.
Yes.
And you probably in the fumes, depending on what you're burning them on, but you could grind small bits of it and add it to incense. So the book actually has incense recipes for a jet incense and an amber incense. So you can kind of tap into that, and it's far more cost effective to use a little bit of jet and a little bit of amber in an incense recipe than it is to just by itself.
Yes.
They were worn as jewelry that symbolized rank, that symbolized faith, that symbolized your kind of social and spiritual and sometimes political role in a given culture. They were really precious materials, even though we don't define them as precious gems today. Their rarity, the way they were traded, the spiritual and symbolic roles that they played were really important. Added to that, in the kind of pre-modern world, the idea of a precious stone wasn't based solely on economic value like we use today. And even that isn't really true. There are semi-precious gems that are far rarer and far more expensive than our four big ones in the precious category. But for a stone to be precious, really the defining feature was what in Latin, in the kind of Latin text called lapidaries, books of stones, they refer to as virtutes or virtues. And a virtue is a power that something possesses to enact change. So any gem could be precious if it was viewed to have this kind of magic, this kind of agency, this kind of spiritual power. And amber and jet are examples of things that were thought to have great and powerful virtue that extended far into the age of superstition. We find people using these as sacred stones today. And they're decidedly not so scientific, and yet the belief in their power and the magic that people experience with them is very, very real.
They're very sought after. And they are when people go to the trouble of trying to replicate them. You see like modern jewelry, which will have amber, and some of it is made with amber. And it's kind of hard to tell the way some of it has been done, except I just go by weight, I guess is the easiest way.
That may not be useful. Some of the lightweight resins have the same specific gravity as it. It's really complicated. But I also want to highlight that this is not a new phenomenon. There is nothing new under the sun. There are texts in Egyptian hieroglyphs that teach you how to simulate gemstones, how to get taught making your own fake rocks. If we look into the late medieval and early modern period, if you look at textbooks published by pharmacist guilds, because then included a lot of preparations from gems and animals and not just plants. Most of these standard pharmacopoeias that talk about the curative power of gems in like the 17th, 18th century also tell you how to identify genuine gems from the inauthentic ones. They don't always get it right because the science of gemology did not exist yet. There's nothing new under the sun. People have been counterfeiting gemstones for thousands of years. We just have better ways to do it now, and we have a more globalized industry for consuming gems. So therefore, there's bigger demand than there ever was. When it comes to something like amber, the most definitive testing is destructive testing, unfortunately. And so if you're just at a shop, you can't go, oh, well, let me burn a piece of this, or let me grind a bit of this up and submit it to our Raman spectroscopy or something else. There are other tells, but it does take a really well-practiced eye, and the parameters for knowing what authentic amber is look very different to the parameters for an authentic diamond than the rules we follow for authentic quartz or malachite. And so, lots of times we'll get asked, well, how do you know a crystal is real? And the answer is you have to know the science of minerals. You have to be able to know an authentic rock or mineral kind of for all of its physical, chemical, optical, and structural features. And that's different for each one of the almost more than 6,000 given mineral species.
Wow.
So there's not one rule they all adhere to. The test I perform for malachite is different than the test I perform for amethyst, is different than the test I perform for emerald, for example. And so, practice, practice, practice.
Right. So you can't even really go by cost because people will be just like, oh God, this thing costs a fortune. Is it a get what you pay for thing, or is it really no? It doesn't really matter. You could be.
You know, generally, if the price is too good to be true, it probably is.
Okay.
But also, if the seller doesn't think they have a fake and they want to charge current market value for what they think is an authentic emerald when it is in fact sillimanite, then you're going to pay that dollar for something that's not an emerald. So the challenge we've got is so complex and nuanced. It deals with transparency in supply chains. It deals with the ethics of mining and extraction.
Raw, polished.
Environmental and social impact.
Yes.
It deals with the kinds of treatments and whether those are disclosed. It also is sometimes wrapped up in like translation from language to other languages. If you go to big trade shows like the Tucson Gem and Mineral Showcase is happening as we speak, when vendors from other parts of the world come together, they have to translate from their native language into English because that's the language at these shows. So if they translate literally, the terms they use might not be identical to the geologically accepted terms in our and so also causes confusion as well. I think that's honestly one of the things that I love about this field, because I get to study history and culture and have my own personal gnosis, my own personal spiritual experience. It's also language and economics and chemistry and crystallography and natural history. And I love that all of these things converge in one place.
I love that as well. I think it's a really great mix, and it's good to have. I know with my emeralds, I've had to have everything appraised, and sometimes I would even go for second opinions just to be sure. But again, that depends on how much I've had to pay for them. Crystal for scrying. Can you use other stones for scrying?
Oh, absolutely. I have a book coming out this spring that I co-wrote with my buddy Devin Hunter, and it's called Crystal Divination. And the first chapter, it's some introductory material and then a chapter per topic in divination. The first chapter is all about scrying. So I give you recommendations on different materials that you can use, different shapes they can be. Ultimately, I think the best scrying tool is the best scrying tool for you. If that's a flawless piece of optical fused silica glass, do that. If it's a cloudy piece of smoky quartz, do that. If it's a piece of ceramic, if it's a polished silver spoon, if it's people used to scry in water held in teaspoons in the mouths of children. They used to scry in the reflection of the moon on a polished fingernail. So people have scried in everything you can imagine. So
if it has a reflection, you can scry.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, we're going to go to the basic, because I know we're getting on to the last 15 minutes of the show. Lead. Why did you include lead? People would look at that and kind of go, but it's lead. So, yeah.
And human culture would not exist as we know it without lead.
Yes.
It is deeply important from an economical and chemical and industrial perspective. Lead still has important uses. But also, we know better than to use lead in all the ways it used to be used in the past. We're not making eating utensils from it. We're not making cosmetics from it. We're not making children's toys from it. I hope those statements are true. Maybe I don't know what every industry is doing. But lead is important because it marks the birth of modern metallurgy. It marks the birth of metallurgy, period. It is thought that the first time that a metal is separated from its ore intentionally, that's an important part of this,
Mm-hmm.
um, is discovering that lead-rich rocks will melt at surprisingly low temperatures. So, hypothetically, you are in a pre-modern, Stone Age society. You build a fire at night. If the rock that you build it on has seams of lead sulfide or galena in it, that will melt at the temperature of your campfire. You
Mm-hmm.
can't necessarily do that as easily with copper. You're definitely not going to be able to do it with iron. Forget it with some of these other metals like zinc, but you can do it with lead very easily. And so
Mm-hmm.
lead is an important resource in ritual and magic because it's available, firstly. But
Mm-hmm.
then also, when we start to develop more, we as human beings start to develop more sophisticated symbol sets, more
Mm-hmm.
sophisticated interpretations of the world around us, we start to associate different, for example, metals with different planets and different
Mm-hmm.
steps in the chemical process. And, lead is associated with the planet Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is classical astrology, sometimes called the greater malefic. It's a force that can be really challenging. I'm a Capricorn. I'm also an Earth sign. I have a huge stellium in Capricorn. So Saturn is a really important figure in my chart. And I jive with Saturn energy really well. But I
Mm-hmm.
also understand why maybe people don't like it. Um, and so because of its utility and accessibility, people are using it. But then they start to interpret its material uses. If you make a bell or a chime out of lead and strike it, you don't get much sound. It's really
Yeah.
dull. If you make
Yes.
it out of copper or an alloy of copper or a precious metal, it's going to sing. I play brass instruments, so I know all about making metal vibrate. Lead doesn't do it. But there is a kind of insulative quality in lead. It is also, I mean, patently, it is poisonous. If we ingest it, if we handle it in the wrong ways, it could be dangerous. Now, I've got, an old Roman token made out of lead that came out of a river in the UK.
Wow.
Someone just found this from, Roman era.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is perfectly safe for me to hold. I'm not going to chew on it or put it in my tea or anything like that, but it's fine to handle in this form.
Mm-hmm.
But those kind of toxic properties of lead also lend it very well to magic that deals with toxic things. So probably the most famous ritual use for lead are in objects that are known as kata desmoi in Greek or deficciones in Latin. They're sometimes known as curse tablets or binding tablets, sometimes just lead tablets, although they could be made of other materials.
Mm-hmm.
And first reason people use lead is because it's soft enough to write on, to inscribe on. It's cheap enough to get. Later on, people use lead because it specifically represents the kind of justice they're seeking. Lead is heavy. If it ends up in your body, you feel heavy. You lose cognitive function. Your muscles stiffen. The traditional medical terminology for lead poisoning up until probably the middle of the 20th century was Saturnism. So we even attributed to Saturn these malefic influences on a chemical. So
Mm-hmm.
you needed to invoke justice. If you needed to protect your loved ones or yourself, lead might be a really important ally to work with. The idea of the archetype of the witch and the archetype of poison are also inextricably linked. There's that famous injunction from the Bible that says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Another translation of the word that we often see interpreted as witch is poisoner. And this makes a lot of sense. Like, killing everybody, probably we shouldn't let them keep doing that, right? But the fact that poison, power, and magic are related is not a surprise when we start to look at the ethnography behind this, the anthropology behind it. Poison represents the transmission of forbidden wisdom. It allows us access to things that we might not otherwise have access to. It is also scary. And the way we grow is by confronting the things that scare us. So lead becomes an ally for this kind of alchemical work of going into the dark and bringing light there. It is
Mm-hmm.
also a symbol of the kind of justice that I think so many people are hungry for today. And my genuine hope is that people can look at the historical uses of lead in cursing work, in banding and binding and banishing and justice work, and go, you know what? I don't have any need for that. I really hope that is true.
Mm-hmm.
But the world
Yeah.
is messy. The world is unfair. The world is full of injustice. And if we can learn how people engaged with stones for these kinds of practices and modernize it in a safe way to
Mm-hmm.
have similar tools to enhance our personal power, to protect the people that we love, to
Mhm.
deal with the tyrant kings that are out there, then I think we should be inspired and rise to the occasion, because magic has always been a tool of the oppressed to kind of level the playing field, to heal those who are sick, to bring power to those who are powerless, and to protect those who are vulnerable. And lead represents that in so many ways.
Mhm. I think there are a lot of things that are held back, but I mean, you look at people who try to eat Tide Pods too, so you factor that in. I mean, if that's out there, it's just due diligence. But I definitely agree on all of your points. And maybe that's something if you can go to an antique shop, look around, see, maybe you can still acquire something that way. Um, so out of I mean, you have 14 things in this book that you were able to combine. Is there anything that you wish you could have put in there as well? I mean, probably could have went on, but just ask.
Yeah. So, I mean, I knew from the beginning there were going to be 13 chapters. I knew really early on that Amber and Jet needed to be in there, and it made the most sense to combine them. So I had to do a lot of kind of creative, like, if I put these rocks in, where would they fall in comparison to the others? Because I still wanted this kind of alchemical through line to work with it, and there's some that just didn't fit. I thought maybe I'd have more than one metal in there, or a chapter on lots of metals, but I had so much to say about lead, and it fulfilled a role none of the other stones did, that it needed its
Yeah.
own. So copper is one I really wanted to have in here. I
Mhm.
love working with copper and copper ores so much, for so many reasons. Thankfully, I have written about it in other places.
Mhm.
Um, I really was leaning towards adding amethyst to this, and ruby, that I
Mm.
thought not ruby proper, but carbuncle,
Mhm.
involved several red stones, and it didn't quite fit the bill either. I wanted to include chalk, and I really said what I needed to with flint, that I
Mhm.
think would have overlapped too much, so I didn't. And I also thought the introduction was going to be devoted more towards soft earth, in other words, clay and soil and things along those lines. And it didn't fit quite the thematic needs of the book either. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
a lot that didn't make it. Maybe one day there'll be more witching stones, but who knows? For now, I'm really pleased with the 13 chapters and the stones in them and the stories they tell. But there's
Yeah.
always more I wish I could do.
It's seriously, it's a great book. I highly recommend it, to anybody who's interested in the stones, but just in everything you can do with them. Again, it's just so thorough going back to, generalizing, getting into the lore, getting into, again, some of the myths and getting into the translations and what you can do with them and the do's, the don'ts, everything. I mean, I don't think there's really anything you didn't cover. And it's hard to find everything in one spot, just broken down, within sections. So thank you so much for coming on. It really was like I really enjoyed the interview. I love learning new things, and I love, now I'm going to go out probably. I have to get more Pacelli. you know. So what do you have coming up? Do you have anything coming up you want to promote? How can people find you? We've got the website up.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So, um, I'm always writing. So I do have a new book coming out this spring called Crystal Divination. I'm writing my 12th book, which will come out sometime after that,
Wow.
called Reiki Rituals. That's its working title. This is a project that I've had in the works for a long time, and it's just kind of sat in the back burner. And finally, I'm getting some time to devote to it, and it's a much bigger project than I thought, which is exciting for me. Um,
Yes.
and as far as like events in the coming months, if you check out my website, if you find me on social media or sign up for my newsletter, all of which is accessible through my website, theluminouspearl.com, you'll see my calendar of events. I keep a pretty busy schedule of online classes. I've got a little bit less in terms of in-person stuff this year, mostly because I've got so much creative behind the scenes work happening, but I will have some in-person Reiki training coming up this spring up in Massachusetts. Um, I may or may not be squeezing in a West Coast trip later in the year. We'll see if that actually works out, and I'll definitely get some more events here in Florida. But I love teaching. Like I said, I write as an extension of my teaching. I teach as an extension of my learning. So I learn something new every day,
Mhm.
and that means I'm always going to have fuel for new classes and new books. I don't plan to stop until I'm physically unable to type.
Wow. Wow, we hope that doesn't happen for a long time because, this was a great book, and I'm looking forward to the next one, and I hope you'll consider coming on and joining me again to talk about some of your other books, especially up and coming, because 'cause I'm booking into, like, June. So, if
That's
you'd be interested, yes, I would love to have you come on, and, if the book is coming out in the spring, that might be perfect to for the release time and having you come on and tell us about it.
absolutely, yeah.
I love that. So thank you very much. And everybody in the chat room, you guys are awesome as always. So thank you all for joining us. Tomorrow night, guys, on the Outer Realm, we've got DJ Jimmy and Jared King from Spooky Appalachia. So, all those stories you hear about, you kind of wonder, oh, come on. There's these crazy horror Appalachian stories. Are they real? Oh, yes. Are they scary? Oh, yes. They really are. Anyway, that's tomorrow night. Thursday night, another open discussion exploring the animal kingdom, getting into, spirit animals, totems, familiars, the old strange tales, animal folklore, superstitions, everything. It'll be a lot of fun. So thank you all for tuning in. You've been listening to Beyond the Outer Realm on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM and the Gulf Coast. You've been listening to us on Roku, Rumble, X, numerous YouTubes, Facebooks, and it will hit a lot of archive sites, probably a couple hundred. So you will definitely find the show. And if you get confused, just email me at theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. I will direct you to the right spot. So thank you very much, Nicholas Pearson, for joining me. Thank you to everyone. Good afternoon from this side of the world and good night from the other side.